Gettysburg, Gettysburg. Everyone gets a Gettysburg. So an auctioneer once said at a war game convention I once attended. And he said that because at one point in the auction, just about every item that came out was a Gettysburg game. Now, I'm no stranger to Gettysburg games. I've been playing Gettysburg games since 1969. And the first Gettysburg game that was produced by Avalon Hill came out in 1959. So we've got really over half a century of Gettysburg games under our belt. And what we're going to do today is look at the guns of Gettysburg, game by Bow and Simmons and produced by Mercury Games. It's quite different, and I'm going to try to show in this video why it's so different. Now, this is not a tutorial of the game. The game is far too complex, I think, to handle in one video. So we'll try to break this down into modules. So let's take a look at the pieces to Guns of Gettysburg. Now, one of the things I'm going to try to show in this video is how different this game is from the other Gettysburg games that have come out before. Now, nearly every Gettysburg game that has been produced before has used a hexagon grid, or in some cases a square grid. But Bowen didn't use that. He went to something he designed himself. We'll call them polygons. One could just say it's an area movement game, but not quite, and we'll get to that in a moment. So in the opening parts of this video, I want to show you that what is not in the game. Because a lot of us, like I said, are coming to Gettysburg with a lot of Gettysburg games under our belt. And we're expecting a lot of things. And this game is quite different. So I'm going to point out, first of all, what is not in the game compared to other games. And then later on we'll see what is in the game. What makes this game so different. Okay, for a lot of us veteran players, we've practically memorized the order of battle for both sides. And as we know, the Union's Second Corps was composed of 3 divisions: Caldwell, Gibbon, and Hayes. And as we see in Bowen's game, he does have 3 counters to represent Hancock's Corps. And this is sort of analogous to divisions, okay? Caldwell, Gibbon, and Hayes, although each of the counters is not named. Now, this integrity does not hold true for all of the corps. For example, Slocum's 12th Corps, we know, only had 2 divisions in it, Williams and Geary. And yet in the game it's represented by 3 counters. So don't think of the Union counters necessarily as being divisions, although most of the time, as it works out, they are. Okay. So the 12th Corps and the 3rd Corps are a little bit different than the others. They're represented by multiple counters, even though they only had 2 divisions. Now, the other thing you might notice is there's no numbers on the counters. Most of us veteran gamers are used to seeing numbers. Well, the numbers are there, but they're hidden in the symbols. In this game, the number of flags on the counter represents the actual strength of the unit. So, 2 flags, strength of 2, 2 flags, strength of 2, so on. Now, as units take casualties, they are later replaced by these full-strength units and to these reduced units with the tattered flags. And the reduction system is more complex than that, but in a simplified way. That's what I'm trying to show. You can see the reduction counters always have a tattered flag. Now, the Confederate divisions are organized a little bit differently, and their integrity is pretty well the same. For example, Heath's division, we know, had 4 brigades in it. I don't know if I can name them offhand. Pettigrew and Davis, Archer, and Brockenbrough, I believe. But they are represented by only 2 counters in the game. And all Confederate divisions are represented thus: 2 counters with a strength of 2 each. So don't think of the counters necessarily as brigades for Confederate and division for Union. They're not. What the designer has done is kept kind of the core integrity. They represent strength points of the whole division. But like the Union divisions, Heath also has step reduction. So when a little tattered flag comes on, it shows that this unit is reduced and will be replaced thus. So that's generally how the step reduction and the counters work in the game. And here's another example of Pender's division, which also had 4 brigades, but is represented by 2 counters. So that's one of the things that makes this game radically different than many other Gettysburg games that you've seen. Now, I said that I would mention what is not in the game, and that's going to sound like a criticism, but it's not. I'm just trying to show you what not to expect, because, like I said, a lot of us have a lot of experience with Gettysburg games. Now, this game does not have any leadership counters. There's no leaders. So you're not going to get a Hancock counter, a Meade, a Lee, Heath, Pender, Anderson. There are no leaders in this game. This game is not about leadership. It's about other things, which we will get into. So that takes some getting used to. You say, well, wait a minute, what about the artillery? Well, here's another surprise. There are no artillery units per se that move on the board. We all know that Heath, Pender, Anderson, and all the Union Division's Corps had associated artillery with them. Well, you do get artillery, but they're in the form of tokens, which we'll get to later, which you offer for fire support in combat situations. But the actual combat units of the game are these blocks, and that's it. That's your order of battle, making this quite a different game than other ones we've seen. Okay, now this game is quite different than even some of Balin's other games, because his movement is a little bit different. Now, we have these areas, which we'll call polygons for now, but units don't actually exist inside an area. He's introduced this new system called positions. So units are actually on these positions at the edge of the areas, like so. So, for example, these two, I'll call them divisions, of Hancock's Corps are facing here to the west and northwest. You can see the lines on the side. So counters are always on the side of these positions, and you're allowed to actually have 3 units in one position if you like. They can hug the edge of the area like that. Now, this is where the game gets a little complex, but it's kind of neat. He introduces this concept of fields of fire, and this is something you really have to get down pat to understand the game. And again, this is meant to be a tutorial. It's only meant to be just a general guide as to the features of this game. This is a game you're going to have to read the rules cover to cover, read every sentence, every word, because it's not an easy game to learn. I certainly wouldn't recommend it for a novice. And I wouldn't recommend it for a first game if you're trying to get somebody into wargaming. There's some rather new concepts here. So one of the things we have to look at on the board is the little wee artillery symbols here represent ridge lines. So whenever you see little artillery, you know that that's a ridge. Here these double lines represent blocked lines of sight, and that's quite important. Now let's take a look at an example of a front. Let's say we have this division here of Hancock. Well, his front polygon, or his front, is the area immediately in front of the counter. That's pretty easy to remember. And his rear is the same area he's in, but obviously to the rear of the block. Now, those two concepts are pretty easy. But he introduces this system called extended fields of fire, and that's very important. In a nutshell, an extended field of fire extends from a unit's front position to the sides if it's not blocked, and if the position abuts the right or left flank of the unit. So, does this unit have an extended field of fire here? No, it doesn't, because it's actually blocked by the ridge here. Does it have an extended field of fire here? Yes, it does, because it's not blocked and it is adjacent to the unit's left flank. Now, these concepts are very complex when it comes to the actual moving of the unit, because in the game there's 4 different types of unit, all completely distinct and not related to each other hardly in any way. So those, you have to learn really 4 different types of movement in the game, and I think the attack movement is the one that's catching everybody by surprise. We're seeing lots of questions about that on Board Game Geek and such. It's not an easy concept. Now, I'll mention just some of the movement to give you an idea. Again, not a tutorial, you have to read the rules. Now the common sense one would be reinforcement movement. Pretty self-evident. This is where your road network will come into play. A unit coming on the board for the first time, if Union, and there's no fields of fire of the enemy, may scoot up the road as far as it likes until it gets into an enemy field of fire or front zone. So that's pretty basic. Reinforcement movement. They can go huge distances on the board. And you'll only see that really on the turn of arrival for new units. The other concept in movement is march movement, which generally is 2 polygons, not always, but generally 2, because you can have extended turns, but that's a whole different thing itself. So units move from position to position. Remember I said not from area to area. So this unit here, being in this position, could move to that position for 1, and then that position for 2. Now there are terrain costs, but I won't get into that. Just as a rule of thumb, you can generally move 2, but the blocked areas do affect movement too. Might as well mention them now. This unit here, for example, if it's fronting here, has a good clear field of fire across this front. So a unit, for example, on little Round Top, up here, right on the top of Round Top, does not have a clear field of fire at all. Why? Because it's blocked on both sides. And that's to represent, of course, the forested terrain of Round Top and, of course, the hill itself. So the interpretation of the ground is one of the most important things in this game. That's the beauty of the map. It's a beautiful map based on a topographical map of the period, quite accurate, and that's really the meat and potatoes of the game, is the movement, lines of sight, and the interpretation of the terrain. Okay, here I'm going to try to give a very, very simple look at attack movement. And again, this is very simple. The game is got some very complex attack moves, and I'm just trying to show you overall how it works. There's 3 criteria for doing an attack, and one of them is that the enemy unit fronts your front polygon. So here's a very simple situation where there's a Confederate unit here and Hancock's here. And in Hancock's turn, he is allowed to attack that unit because it's adjacent to his front polygon. And the attack procedure has, I think, 9 steps to it, so I'm not going to go through them all here. But in general, very general, this is where the artillery will come in, the Union player would state his attack move, state that he's going across this field, and he would move the counter up. Both sides would apply counter battery, and this is where the artillery counters come in. The Confederate would lay down his artillery tokens in front, showing the counter battery fire he's going to give. The Union would throw down his counter battery tokens to show the support fire he would give. Then the artillery batteries would engage each other. You'd flip up, compare strengths, that kind of thing, inflict any hits, possible hits on the blocks. There's a whole sub-procedure to that which I won't get into. I just wanted to show you how artillery is introduced into the game. You have these artillery counters which are based on the corps and division that they're attached to. Very semi-complex rules in how the artillery works. That's how it works in a battle. After the artillery is fired, both sides would expose their units, compare their factors. Remember, that's a 2 and that's a 2. There's all kinds of modifiers to the attack, and you'd get finally an attack result where one side may lose a step or the other. Let's say, for the sake of argument, Hancock lost this battle. This unit would come off the board and be replaced by another lower strength one. Again, even there, I'm simplifying this procedure, just trying to show you generally how the game works. You can imagine what it's like when you've got units all over the place. It gets a bit more complex than that. That's generally how attack movement works. Okay, another thing that is not in the game is strict historical order of appearance. Now, most of us that have played Gettysburg games have practically memorized the order of appearance for most units. For example, here's the cards from the intermediate level game of Gettysburg produced by Avalon Hill in 1977. We all know that Davis, Archer, Pettigrew, and Brockenborough arrived around 7 o'clock in the morning on July 1st from the Chambersburg Pike. We know that Garnett and Pogue arrived around noon. Doles, Iverson, and parts of Rhodes' division began to arrive from the Munisburg and Carlisle Road around 1 p.m. We've all got it memorized, and we have information that was not available to Lee and Meade. And of course we have the Union order of appearance too. So we've all seen this before in just about every Gettysburg game that I've been playing for 30 years. You know, well, yeah, I know that I've got to push Devon and Gamble back, and yeah, I know that the Union First Corps is going to cut off the Emmitsburg Road, and he'll probably get there by 10 a.m., and the Iron Brigade will probably be in the lead. So we're almost playing a scripted Gettysburg game. Now, make no mistake, I like to do the historical what-ifs the same as everybody else, but Guns of Gettysburg has introduced something kind of new, and I think it's about time. Remember I said there's no leaders in here, so you don't get Reynolds or Sickles or Meade. So what the designer is trying to show here in this game is that he wants the players to be placed in the situation that Lee and Meade were in, that they didn't know exactly what was in front of them. I might point out another radical change in this game, and I mean it's radical. Every Gettysburg game that I've ever seen has pretty well included all of Stuart's cavalry and all of the Union cavalry. This game kind of threw me for a loop at first, because the Confederates don't get any cavalry. None. Zippo. There isn't one single Confederate cavalry unit in the game. The designer's taking the view that, you know, Stuart arrived late afternoon of July 2nd. He really was off the board to the east there, and he only became active on July 3rd. So he's just not included the cavalry. He's trying to give you the situation the way Lee saw it. And for the Union, he doesn't get all the cavalry either. He only gets Devon and Gamble, which start northwest of town, and you get Kilpatrick's division. So you only get really 2 divisions of cavalry for the Union, and that's intentional by the designer. So be prepared for that. And I kind of like that. I think it's kind of neat. Anyway, getting back to the situation that Lee and Meade faced, and Bowen's turn record. Now his turn record is hourly turns, like most Gettysburg games. But this is the first darn game I've ever seen where the turn record itself needs its own set of rules. I mean, it's really kind of amazing. I mean, every game I've ever played of Gettysburg, you take the turn record, you know, you do your 7 o'clock turn, you do your 8 o'clock turn, you do your 9 o'clock turn, and this moves 1 notch every turn. Not in this game. Bowen is really thought outside the box here. You mean you've got special rules just for the turn record. How complex is that? Now, it's not really complicated. What he's trying to show is that there are large periods of inactivity in the real battle. For example, July 1st saw lots of activity, there was lots of fighting. July 2nd, almost for the whole day, nothing happened. And to show those lax periods where there was no combat, in the game you have the opportunity of doing extended turns, where the turn might start at 9 o'clock, but it might end at 12, so you'll be able to do 3 turns, 3 hours rather, in 1 turn. Now there's all kinds of rules to show that. The men can move a little bit further, that kind of thing. But I won't get into that. I just want you to be aware of how the turn record is different than any other game you've seen. It is radically different. So the historical order of appearance is absent in this game. The Second Corps isn't necessarily coming on at 10 o'clock. It might not even come till noon. It might not come till 3 o'clock. It's totally variable. Okay? And one might say, whoa, I'm not sure I like that, because the corps were in certain positions. Well, again, he's trying to show you the situation that faced. Now to compound that, this might be hard for some people to accept, but like historical games, the corps and divisions don't necessarily have to come in on the historical road that they came in either. Now for the Confederates, he has seeded this a little bit, and I'm glad he did, because the Confederate order of appearance was dictated by the positions of the corps to some degree. The 3rd Corps was in advance, the 2nd Corps was behind it, and Longstreet's Corps was well behind. So even though he's got variable order of appearance for the Confederates, the road they come on is going to be fixed for the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st Corps elements here. They are going to come in on the Chambersburg Pike, but you don't know exactly when. That's not the case for the division that comes in on the Mumsburg Road. Historically, that would have been Rhodes' division, but in this game, it might be could be Johnson or Early. You don't know. And the other division that comes up here on the Harrisburg Road. Now, one rule I must confess I don't like too much, and I missed it at first, was that reinforcement move that I described. When a unit comes on the board, it can come on in march mode, let's call it line of battle, or road mode. Okay. Now for the Union, he'll always choose road mode wherever he can, so he can just scoot up that road. The Confederate does not have that option. The rule is that the first unit that comes on at a road must come on in march mode. So they would come on kind of like this, kind of paving the way as they did historically. I understand the historical reasoning why the designer chose it that way, but it also can lead to some abuse later on. Also, this denies, the way I read the rules, that means that the unit that comes in here at Harrisburg, the only unit, by the way, that can do so, cannot come on road mode. He must come on in line of battle. I'm a little troubled by that, but I can live with it. I understand why he's done it. But so beware of that. Units come in at variable times and variable entries. And that really is almost the gem of this game. Every time you play it, it's going to be quite different than your standard Gettysburg games where everything is kind of scripted. Okay, I have to say something about the rules booklet to the game. It's quite nice. It's done on shiny paper. It is well illustrated. That's its strong points. Lots of great illustrations. It's only, 16 pages or so. And even then, of rules, we're talking really 13 pages of rules. You say, well, that's great. Only 13 pages of rules. Yeah, but there is almost no repetition in the rules, none. There is no cross-referencing of rules. So when you read a sentence in a Ballin-Simmons game, you better take it to heart, because it's not an easy game to grasp the concepts. Because I've read the rules 2 or 3 times and thinking, well, I've got the concepts. Then when you go to play the game, you see you've actually kind of missed it. There's lots to learn here. I think that's kind of the weak point of the game, is the rule style. They're a little abbreviated for such a game with such new concepts. I don't know what else more to tell you about the game. I guess I could mention the objectives which changed. That's kind of cool. I've never seen that in any other game. Part of the historical objectives is for the Confederates to capture territory that is marked by the Union with these little wee blue stars. Okay, we've all seen that in other games. The stars, of course, are fixed. But in this game, if a Confederate does capture one of the stars, he replaces it with his own. Now the trick is that these objectives can actually move, which I've never seen in any other game. I thought that was really cool. I understand why the designer's done it that way, and again, it's really thinking outside the box. Let me give you an example. Let's say McPherson's Ridge, for example. Okay, McPherson's Ridge. All Gettysburg games, and as I said, the designer assigns, yeah, capture McPherson's Ridge is worth 10 points. Well, McPherson's Ridge might be important on July 1st when the Union was defending it. But McPherson's Ridge means nothing if the battle lines move down here, and on July 3rd. So what Bowen has done is he's allowed the Union to change the objective hexes depending on where the front line is. And I thought that's really innovative. I thought that's kind of cool. I don't know what else to say about the game. I just want to give you an overview of it. I like the game. I think it is fresh. I think it is new. I think people who have played Gettysburg games before will like it. Now, does it replace the Gettysburg games you've played before? Well, that's a tough one. Because remember, the things that are not in this game, like leadership and historical order of battle with named units, named artillery battalions, you may miss that. So I can't say that this is the game that replaces all other Gettysburg games, but I can say that if you want something new and innovative and fresh, and to kind of understand the situation that Lee and Meade faced, I recommend playing the game. So I'm hoping that other people will do some more training videos on this game, because I'm still learning it. So that's it for Guns of Gettysburg by Bowen Simmons and produced by Mercury Games.